They knocked my wife out cold on our own front steps. Not in some bar at midnight or behind a gas station, but under the porch light. We wired ourselves on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. And the crazy part is, it all started with 3 little words she said through our gate. No entry today. If that was your wife, your front porch, your blood on your concrete, what would you have done? Would you have stood back and argued about bylaws and policy? Or would you have gone straight through that gate like I did? My name's Eli, and this is the day our nice, polite homeowners association decided they were the law out here and found out the quiet mechanic who lives on the last dusty lot was done being pushed around. Most days, our life is pretty simple. We've got 10 acres of rough New Mexico dirt on the edge of a subdivision, a handful of cattle that think fences are a suggestion, more chickens than makes sense, a garden my wife Maddie treats like it's our retirement account, and a beat-up work truck that rattles so loud you hear me before you see the dust. You know what I mean. I fix pumps and heavy equipment for whoever calls ranchers, contractors, folks building dream houses they probably can't afford. And I come home tired and sore, but in that good way, where you know exactly what you traded your time for. Maddie keeps books for small businesses in town, pays bills, chases goats off her tomatoes, remembers birthdays. I forget, and for years, our biggest argument was whether to replace the old well pump before it dies, or squeeze one more season out of it. The catch is our little patch sits inside something called Mesa Ridge Estates, which sounds like fountains and marble foyers, but is really a bunch of dusty lots and rutted roads. Someone decided needed an HOA, so a board-formed dues followed, and a guy named Leonard Crane slid into the chairman's seat like he'd been rehearsing for that moment his whole life. Leonard's the kind of man who shakes your hand while looking over your shoulder. Silver hair, white teeth, black SUV that's somehow never dirty, even in mud season. And he loves rules, the way some people love football, quoting section numbers like scores from last night's game. Guys like me, old truck manure on the boots, no fancy degree, he treats like a problem to be managed. Cracks little jokes at meetings about my trailer, hurting property values, while people chuckle, and I sit there in my stained work shirt pretending it doesn't sting. Because where I'm from, you learn early that blowing up in public just gives folks a better story to tell about you later. What Leonard didn't count on was Maddie. When he sweet-talked her into helping out as volunteer treasurer, he thought he was getting a friendly ranch wife who'd sign whatever he slid across the table. But what he actually got was a professional bookkeeper with a spine like rebar. She went through the HOA books the same way she does for her clients. Line by line saw landscaping bills that magically doubled 3 vendors sharing the same PO, box checks going out to a company she'd never seen on any approved list. And instead of shrugging and saying, "That's odd," she followed the money all the way to a shell company tied back to Leonard. Fake maintenance invoices dues, leaving our account and landing in his. And she didn't stand up at the next meeting and scream. She printed everything. Drove into town, handed the whole folder to the county, and told them. Something isn't right here. Leonard wrote checks, signed papers, paid fines, stayed just far enough on the right side of the law to avoid stripes. But his shiny reputation got cracked right down the middle. And in his head, Maddie hadn't just caught him, she'd humiliated him in front of his little kingdom. After that, the air around us changed. We started getting violation letters for trash cans, visible from the road for more than an hour. The angle my work trailer was parked, a fence board, leaning wrong. Stuff nobody else heard about, and at one meeting Leonard looked right at us and said, "Mesa Ridge might not be a good fit for people who don't share the board's vision, which if you've ever dealt with an HOA you know is code for we want you gone." Around that time, Maddie started noticing the fine print about easements for utilities and future energy development buried in the bylaws language that hadn't seemed important when we signed our papers, and suddenly it mattered a lot. We found bright orange survey flags way out in the back pasture. We hadn't put there, and trucks with a gas company logo slowed down at our fence line a little too often to be truly lost. We kept saying we'd pick a Sunday, sit down at the kitchen table with coffee and a highlighter, and figure out exactly what those clauses meant. But there was always another busted pump, another neighbor needing a hand, another job I couldn't afford to turn down. And those Sundays kept turning into maybe next week, and yeah, that part's on me. Then came that Tuesday, one of those still heavy afternoons, where the heat just sits on you, and the loudest sound is a fly hitting the screen. I was behind the house in a shallow trench, wrestling with the forever leaking irrigation line, half my arm buried in mud, and Maddie was closer in collecting eggs and fussing at the goats for chewing on her green beans. Just a normal, boring day that should have blurred into all the others. Around 3:30, I heard an engine on the access road that didn't sound like any of our neighbors. Too fast exhaust, a little too proud, like it wanted everyone to know it was there. So I stopped, wiped my hands on my jeans, and listened. A black pickup rolled up to our metal gate and slid to a stop in a cloud of dust. The driver door swung open, and out hopped this kid. Maybe mid-20s. Tactical-looking vest, mirrored sunglasses, buzz cut. Trying real hard to say authority, and on his chest was a patch that read, Property Compliance Unit. No county seal, no state emblem, just aggressive font on cheap nylon. Maddie set the egg basket on the porch rail and walked down the steps, but stopped a good 10 feet from the gate, close enough to talk far enough. He couldn't crowd her. Afternoon, she called polite, but not exactly warm. Afternoon, ma'am, he said, squaring his shoulders. We're with the Mesa Ridge Compliance Division. There are new regulations on livestock and accessory structures. We need to perform an immediate inspection of your rear facilities today. While he was reciting that little speech, I noticed the passenger door stayed closed. Another guy sat there, in the same vest and glasses. But he didn't get out, just stared at our place and tapped his fingers on the dash like he was on lookout. And every hair on my neck stood up because the real inspectors I've met over the years always climb out. Shake your hand, complain about the heat, ask if your dog bites. They don't sit in the truck like backup in a cop show. Maddie didn't move any closer. I've lived here a long time, she said, and when she starts like that, you should listen. The county calls ahead. The state sends letters. They show up in marked vehicles with real badges. I've never heard of a Mesa Ridge Compliance Division. So who exactly do you work for? His jaw flexed. He shot a quick look toward the passenger seat, like he was checking whether he'd messed up the script, then pasted on a little smile. Ma'am, it's all in the packet. The board mailed last month, he said. They've given us enforcement authority. If we don't inspect today, there'll be fines. It's mandatory. We're just trying to keep everyone in compliance. He kept saying the board like it was the Supreme Court. Never once said county or state or any actual law, and the way he held himself when Maddie pushed back was pure Leonard. That fake patience stretched tight over entitlement. And I remember thinking, yeah, I see exactly whose son you are. Maddie dug her heels in. If you're with the county, show me your badge, she said. If you're with the state, show your credentials and the order authorizing this inspection. If you're only with the HOA, you can come back with written notice and a lawyer, but you are not stepping onto my land today without something real. His smile thinned out. Ma'am, you really don't want to make this complicated, he said. dropping his voice like he thought that made him scary. "We're trying to do this the easy way. Resistance is just going to end up in your file." Maddie didn't flinch. She just nodded toward the gravel and said, "You've got 30 seconds to show me legitimate ID when that's up. I'm calling the sheriff. That's as simple as I can make it." Right then, the passenger door finally opened, and the second guy slid out. Except instead of coming to the gate, he drifted along our fence line. Not looking at us, eyes on the back of our place, slow and casual, in that way that isn't casual at all. And I've watched enough security footage to know what that looks like. That wasn't inspection, that was testing our perimeter, trying to make us feel surrounded. Maddie saw it too. She reached back, grabbed the gate, and swung it shut. With a metallic clang. "Time's up," she told him. "No ID. No entry. You want to see the back of my property. Bring a deputy and a court order." Whatever little string was holding that kid's temper together snapped. He stepped right up so close to the bars, his vest brushed the metal eyes hot. "Lady, you're making a serious mistake," he spat. "We're not asking anymore." Maddie lifted her phone just enough for him to see the unlocked screen. "Then leave," she said, her watch me dial. His hand shot through the gap between the bars, faster than my brain could process it, open palm, full force, right across her face, and the sound of it cracked across the yard like a board breaking. Her head snapped sideways. Her heel slipped on the top step, and she went backwards. Back of her skull hit the concrete with a sick, dull thud. I swear. I felt in my teeth her arms jerked once and then just fell. Blood started seeping into her hair, and down the step we poured together. In that second, the world shrank down to 3 things: my wife on the ground, his hand in the air, and the space between us. There wasn't any thinking my body decided before my mind did one heartbeat. I was behind the house the next. I was running our 4-foot gate, might as well have been a line of paint. I cleared it without feeling it hit him in the chest with my shoulder and drove him into the gravel hard enough to knock the breath out of him. We bounced and rolled. Some old wrestling instinct woke up. I twisted his arm up between his shoulders, planted my knee in his back, and pinned him there with his face in the dirt. "You just hit my wife on my property," I heard myself say, my own voice sounding weird and far away. "You're not going anywhere until a real cop tells you what that was." I can't breathe. "Let me up. We'll leave. We'll go." He gasped, spitting gravel. And I just said, "She's not breathing great either," and put a little more weight on his shoulders so he'd understand he'd lost control of how this day was going to go. Behind me, the second guy finally lost whatever cool he had. "Tyler." "What the hell, man," he yelled. And just like that, we had a name. You weren't supposed to hit her. This was just supposed to be pressure. Then he did exactly what I hoped. He grabbed his phone and called his boss. And I heard Leonard's name clear as day. "Crane, we've got a problem." "Tyler hit the woman. She's out. Her husband's got him pinned. You need to get out here now." I didn't know every detail yet, but I knew enough this wasn't some random scam. This came straight from the HOA throne. I dialed 911 with my free hand, told the dispatcher my wife was unconscious from an assault by 2 men pretending to be officials, gave our address heard units and ambulance en route, and said, "Good, bring cameras." Funny thing, the first vehicles to roll up weren't the sheriff's, a black SUV and a gray sedan. Pulled in behind the pickup a few minutes later, kicking up another cloud of dust, and out of that SUV stepped Leonard Crane himself, looking like he was walking into a ribbon. Cutting shirt pressed, boots clean. Worried expression arranged on his face, two big guys in sport coats fanning out behind him, like they were his security detail. He took it all in, his son under my knee, Maddie on the steps with blood in her hair, his hired muscle pale and shaking by the truck, then called out Eli, what on earth is going on here, like he'd just stumbled onto somebody else's problem, instead of the mess he'd sent rolling up our driveway, and you could still see it in his eyes. He honestly believed he could talk his way out. "You sent him," I said, not shouting. Just tired and mad, in a way that settles in your bones. "You sent your boy out here with a fake badge and told him to push us around. Leonard did that." Offended thing powerful men do, hand to his chest. "My son is part of our compliance team," he said. "He came to perform a legitimate inspection. You attacked him. I need you to release him before you turn a minor violation into a serious crime." Before I could answer, the second kid cracked under the weight of it. He slapped her mister. "Crane," he blurted, voice shaking. She shut the gate, and he just snapped. And you could see Leonard's jaw tighten, like he wanted to fire him on the spot. That's about when our neighbor Mrs. Evans pulled up in her dusty white pickup, half in the ditch phone, already recording. Because 30 years in the county office teaches you when to hit record, and Hank rolled in right behind her big ex-military guy, with his arms crossed and his jaw clenched. "What is going on here?" Mrs. Evans called. Then she saw Maddie on the steps, and her voice dropped. "Oh no, honey. Can you hear me?" Leonard swung toward the fresh audience like a politician at a town hall. "There's been an unfortunate misunderstanding during a compliance visit," he announced. "Eli overreacted and assaulted my son. We're just trying to keep things calm until the deputy arrives." Hank looked Tyler and the other kid up and down and said, "What agency are you with?" And when the answer was basically the HOA, he snorted. "That's not how inspections work, man." Mrs. Evans shook her head. "Since when does an HOA send unmarked muscle to somebody's front porch?" she said. "Leonard, you know better than that." Leonard pointed straight at my wife, then his nice mask. Slipping. "This woman has been undermining this community for years," he snapped. "She cost us thousands with her accusations about our finances. Now, her husband attacks my son, and you're all acting like they're the victims." Maddie, being Maddie, somehow managed to sit up with Mrs. Evans's help, one hand on the railing, the other pressed to the back of her head, and said, "They weren't accusations you were stealing from your neighbors? The county proved it, remember?" Then took a shaky breath and added, "And now you're trying to sell our mineral rights." "Leonard, I saw the draft contract's gas company out of Denver. HOA gets a payout if enough of us sell or get pushed off our land." The second kid completely unraveled at that. "He told us the deal was worth $2.5 million. He shouted. "Said we'd get 20 grand each. If we could make you sell, said you two were dead weight, and you could feel the air change. Like everybody suddenly realized this was never about a fence board or a trailer, this was about a pile of money." Sirens came down the road right on cue. A county cruiser rolled up dust, swirling around the lights, and Deputy Collins stepped out, hand near his holster, but relaxed, eyes going from Maddie to me to the cluster of vehicles, like he was putting the pieces together before anyone spoke. "What's the situation?" he asked, and of course Leonard rushed to meet him. "Deputy, my son and an HOA officer were conducting a legitimate inspection when this man attacked him. We're trying to keep things from getting out of hand." Collins walked right around him and went straight to my wife. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" he asked, and she pointed at Tyler with a shaking hand. "He hit me through the gate when I told him." "No," she said, "I fell and hit my head. He's not law enforcement. They're just wearing plastic patches." Collins looked up at the camera. Above our door, looked at the cheap patch on Tyler's vest, looked at the blood on our concrete. Then asked me what happened to Mrs. Evans. What she had on her phone. Listened to Hank talk about how they tried to flank the property, and you could almost see the switch flip in his head like, okay, I know exactly what this is. He radioed for backup and an ambulance, then said in that calm, no-nonsense tone, "All right, here's how this is going to go." And for the first time since Maddie hit the concrete, I felt my shoulders drop half an inch, because real authority had finally shown up. Tyler went into cuffs. First, gravel stuck to his cheek, whining that he didn't mean for it to go that far. Leonard started throwing around words like board connections and consequences, and Collins just reminded him he'd been around for the last investigation and knew exactly who he was dealing with. When the second cruiser rolled in, Collins turned to Leonard and told him as calmly as ordering coffee that he was under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and organizing a criminal intimidation attempt on private property. And Leonard actually laughed. Told Collins he'd just ended his own career. And Collins said, "That's something you and your attorney can discuss later. So turn around." And that was the moment our big, bad HOA chairman became just another man in handcuffs in my dusty driveway. I'd love to tell you everything since then. Wrapped up neat with a bow. But it's been court dates and paperwork and neighbors quietly deciding whether they're on. Team MU did what you had to do, or Team MU made things messy. And more than a few nights where I lay awake wondering if jumping that gate was the right call. But here's where I land. For years, guys like Leonard looked through me like I was part of the scenery. And the day his fake authority knocked my wife unconscious on our own steps, I finally drew a line and refused to move it just because a man with a title told me to. So now I want to hear from you if somebody came onto your land with a fake badge and a real attitude, if they put hands on your spouse and tried to hide behind words like compliance and policy. What would you have done? Would you have stepped back and hoped the system sorted it out? Or would you have done what I did and trusted that the truth, the cameras and the neighbors would back you when the dust settled? You know what I mean. Do you think HOAs and neighborhood boards actually protect communities? Or do they just hand rule books to bullies who like having power over regular folks? Have you ever had to stand your ground against someone hiding behind the rules while they pushed you around? That happens more than people admit. Tell me in the comments if you think I crossed a line, or if the line got crossed the second that hand hit my wife's face. And if you've got your own story about HOA's fake authority, or times you had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your family, share it, because the more we drag these stories into the light, the harder it is for people like Leonard to call it a misunderstanding and walk away clean.